All right, good morning everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live today from the Salt Marsh. My name is Callie.
Oh, I gotta flip the camera around, but my name is Debbie, and we are on the Salt Marsh. We brought our friend Captain Ian, and he's back exploring the Salt Marsh a little bit too. But I want to give a little shout out to Waterford Schools. Good morning. If there are any teachers or students watching, tell us where you're watching from, what school are you from, or where you're watching from, even if you're just watching from home. So we're excited to help out our teachers at this time. I wanted to show you some of the cool things about the Salt Marsh, some of the cool features before we jump right into exploring it. But I tried to show right at the beginning of the video, we had some birds utilizing the shore over by our boat. I don't know if you can see right at the water line. They are they're kind of walking along the shore, hunting for invertebrates to eat. And there were also some songbirds that are using the upper part of the marsh over where there's a lot more scrubby brush beyond Captain Ian over there. And there's actually one sitting at the top of the grass. That's a red-winged blackbird. Sitting out there. So what is a salt marsh, Callie?
Well, salt marsh is a really productive habitat that we have in Long Island Sound, and so we want to explore it with you today. One of the things I want to make sure you can see is sort of where we are in relationship to the other habitats around us. So if you look off this direction, we've got the Pequannock River. On the other side of the Pequannock River, you can see that sandy barrier beach. And so this salt marsh habitat is really a transition zone. We move from sort of a beach habitat to this salt marsh that gets covered up by the tide twice a day. And then if we look beyond, sort of in the distance, you can see that there's forest, right? So terrestrial habitat beyond the salt marsh. So we call it a buffer zone or a transition zone. It's really between that terrestrial and between that beach habitat. And so that's one of the characteristics that makes it pretty unique. The other thing is kind of it's made up of a kind of mix of sediment and organic matter that we call peat. So we're going to take a closer look at that. This area is like a giant sponge, and so I want to show you what that looks like. We brought a shovel, take a little piece of the marsh out. We're going to return it back to where we found it, so don't worry, we're not hurting anything. But we want you to see kind of what this looks like.
Okay, so it looks like a big shovel full of dirt to start. But there's some important features about the cordgrass or the marsh grasses that grow here. They have really deep running roots called rhizomes that will start to that's how they reproduce, is they'll grow under the ground and spread, and then more grass will be able to come up above. So the roots here do a very important job. They're able to trap sediment that's being carried by our river and also in by the tides. So it's trapping all of the sediment, but also as the seasons pass, the grasses will die back and be broken down and add extra organic matter. So this is really nutrient-rich peat. And I can tell you right now, it's a little stinky. I think it's really good. Like Callie said, it's a spongy material. So it's good at trapping water as well as the sediment. So do you want to give that a squeeze?
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. See if you can see anything.
Wring some water out of it. It's kind of hard to tell. But she is wringing like a whole handful of water out of the sediment here. So the peat is absorbing, it's trapping sediment, it's absorbing water, and this area is so productive.
That's right.
Primary producers or photosynthesizers. So I want to say good morning to people in Groton. I saw a couple people tuning in from Waterford and Groton. If you're tuning in from somewhere else, go ahead and share it in the comments. What kind of grass do we have growing here, Callie?
Okay, good. I hope you can get a close view because we pulled this piece on purpose. You can see these nice new green shoots. And you can also see some of that brown sort of grass that's passed from last season. So you can see examples of both the salt marsh is really still waking up this spring, and we've got some Spartina grasses here. Those are the grasses that you see kind of blowing in the breeze, but this is really neat. Take a look here where my finger is pointing. Can you see that?
So, Emily Stone West.
Looks like...
I just got a signal saying that our connection was poor, but we're back. And we were just looking at some of the other types of grass. Hello in Reading, Mass. Hello, Wyndham. The Westerbergs want to see the pickle grass.
Yeah, so this is it. It's just starting to come up, but this is a type of succulent that we find in the marsh. Sometimes it's called glasswort. I always call it pickle grass.
Oh, we're back. Slightly better signal 100 feet away from where we were. But so anyway, we were talking briefly about the pickleweed, and it's a salt resilient plant. Or a succulent, like Callie said. So it's a pretty fun plant for the people at Project O, because we like to eat it.
That's right.
We call it sea pickle because it tastes like you're just eating a pickle. So we're going to find a piece right here. And I'm going to be socially distant from Callie while she eats it.
All right.
Woo,
so here we go.
Thanks for staying put, guys. I appreciate it.
Mmm. A little salty. Mmm. Delicious.
A little muddy too.
Salad is actually really tasty.
Yeah, they're crunchy and salty, and they a little briny, like a little sour. They're lovely. We want to quickly show you another part of the marsh here, because this place is constantly changing. This is a little salt pool or salt pan that we found in the middle of the marsh. So you can see we're actually still a long way off from the Pequannock River and from the shoreline on this side too. So how did the salt water get here? That's how did the water, I said salt water, but how did water get here? Well, we have to find out whether it was rainwater or seawater that got here. So we're going to do a quickie little test.
That's right. So what we have here is a hydrometer, and all we have to do is fill this up with water, and the more salt that's in here, the higher the needle is going to point up. So this water could be here from rain, right? That's collected in this sort of low depression or the salt pan. Or it's possible that this water came in with high tide. So if you can see that number,
right there.
There we go. It's about
between 26 and 28.
Yeah, so about
26 and a half, 27, somewhere around there.
Okay, so around 27 parts per thousand is our salinity. That's pretty salty, in fact. So if we were thinking this was just straight rainwater, it would be pointing to 0 ppt, 0 parts per thousand. And the open ocean is about 35 parts per thousand. So yeah, we're in an estuary, and this is influenced by the high tide, which is pretty cool. Yeah,
so it's salty in here now. It might even get saltier. How might that happen?
Well, if the sun stays the way it is, as evaporation occurs in here, that water, the fresh water, is going to evaporate out of here. It's going to leave the salt behind, and so this can get really concentrated with salt, especially in the summer when we have that heat beating on this area over most of the day.
Okay, so that means if it's changing so much, if it gets hot in the afternoon and cold overnight and fresh when it rains and salty when it evaporates, nothing could live in here, right?
You may think that, but and we in the salt pond, we could see little fish swimming around in here and even some shrimp. So we'll see if we can find any for you here. I'll see if I can scare any up. They're quick, so you'll have to have a careful eye here. Let's see if we see anybody.
Oh no, we caught them all. Oh, there went one.
Oh, yep.
You can see a little shadow of something swimming along. Anybody in there, Callie?
Lots of muck. Let's see. Oh! Okay, I'm going to put it right over the bucket so I don't lose it and drop it right in. Can you see that? That's right. Let's see if there's anybody else in here. Okay, I think just one in that scoop, but hey, not bad, right?
Yeah, you scared one, caught one. Not too bad. See a big boy right here, Callie. Can you see him?
Oh, yes, I can.
See him on camera. Oh boy. Sorry.
That's all right.
There's a big old killifish just hanging right in the shallows there. So even though this seems like it might be kind of an inhospitable place, there are organisms here. We also caught a couple before we went live. Let's see, that's our little
sheep's head minnow
right there. And then the killifish. A couple fish swimming around in our bucket here. So we also saw some shrimp. And occasionally some other organisms might find their way in here, like little crabs and stuff. So the marsh is an important home for all of these guys because it's also an important part of the food web.
That's right. So we want to show you evidence of some of the other creatures that we can find hanging out in the marsh. It's one of my favorites. We just weren't lucky enough to catch one yet this morning, and that's the fiddler crab. So if we look carefully at the,
See some here too.
yeah, we'll try to get our shadows out of the way. That's the tricky part. We can see evidence of their burrows. So these fiddler crabs actually burrow into this peat, and you can oftentimes see their holes. They're connected to each other underground in this sort of matrix of peat, but they're a really cool animal. The male fiddler crabs have one really big claw and one teeny tiny claw, and the females have two small claws, and so that's an easy way to identify them. Again, Debbie and I have been searching, but we weren't able to get one on camera to show you, but we know they're here.
They can feel our feet vibrate the peat for several steps away, so you have to really be able to sneak up on them or wait patiently for them to come out.
That's right.
All right, so we're going to do a little measurement because we're scientists. We're going to measure how deep this peat goes. So we know that the sediment has been collecting here in the roots of that cordgrass for a really long time. And then as the seasons pass, the grass will die back and then be recycled and add to the layers of peat. So we want to see how deep it goes. So we're going to use an instrument called a peat pole. How do we use it, Callie?
I'm going to push this down as far as I can until I start to get some resistance. When I get some resistance, that means that I'm probably not in peat any longer, that I am probably in some kind of sand or maybe even rock. So start to push it down and see how far we can get. I can't get it anymore from there, but don't worry, we brought our meter stick with us so we can actually take a measurement of how deep this is.
Now, if Callie can't get it out, Captain Ian's going to help her pull it out so I can hold it.
Just going to give it a little wiggle. There we go. So can you see that? You can see sort of how far the sediment came up on the stick. And so I'm going to put this meter stick down here.
I kind of come to the side here so you can see the whole thing. So you can see that there's wet on the peat pole and it's also brown. So right where it ends is where our measurement's going to be. So you can see it's all the way at 60 centimeters plus an extra 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6, yep.
So we'll call that 66 centimeters of peat below our feet right now. So we could measure all different parts of the marsh and see how it changes from one coast to the other. But it looks like right now there's a decent amount of peat right here.
That's right.
And this can be home to more animals than just fiddler crabs. So we're going to head on over there.
Yep. So because the tide is so low right now, this is actually a great opportunity for us to see on the edge of the peat. So this area here is covered up at high tide. It's almost like this little mini salt pond here. But come to the edge so we can show you what this looks like at low tide. It's a really great opportunity.
So you can see all the peat, right? So part of the day, this entire little pool will be filled with water. But right now at low tide, we can see all this peat. And it goes down to the bottom. Now, there are going to be some animals living here, so I want you to keep your eyes peeled.
You see that?
So I'm on my own shadow here. There we go. Yeah, so we've got a ribbed mussel that has lodged itself right in the peat here. We got a couple of them actually up underneath some of this grass that is just starting to revive. You can see signs of spring. These plants are coming back to life. Oh, we got a little snail right here too.
Oh, nice.
This is called a periwinkle, although there are many species of snails that utilize the salt marsh. We were hoping to see some really special snails called coffee bean snails that love to eat the marsh grass, but it looks like it's just a little too early in the season for us to see.
Right. Oh, I did want to point out just on the edge of the grass here, take a look.
Oh,
This is an interesting plant that's coming up, this bright green with the broad leaf that you see here. That's not one of the grasses that we find in the salt marsh. That's actually one of the flowers that we find here, and that's called sea lavender. Has a beautiful purple flower in the summer, and so again, that's just waking up too as it's starting to get warmer, and so that's the sea lavender plant.
And there's all kinds, I can see more pickleweed.
Yeah.
Yeah, pickleweed coming in. Pickle grass.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at that mussel that you just found, Debbie, because that is pretty neat.
Nice.
So these are a couple of ribbed mussels that we pulled out of the salt marsh, and if you look, they've got some sediment that's hanging on because they've got bristle threads. Can you see those tiny little hairs? They're kind of like
I don't know if I can
anchors.
see them on camera here. Oh, maybe a little focus.
Well, you can see that they're dangling, right? So they're attached
yeah,
to the
I can see
mussel without me holding on to them. So these mussels play a really important part in the marsh as well. They help to keep the peat in place, so it helps to prevent erosion. And those bristle threads are actually quite strong, so we often see them clustered together. We'll see many mussels kind of hanging out in one spot.
Pretty sweet. Now, that's not the only bivalve we found out here, right?
No, we've got. I'll show you. Look at this one.
Ooh, baby, look at the size of that. Anybody know what this is? Put it in the comments if you know what kind of animal this is. If you watched our feature last week, you might know.
Yep, and while people are making some predictions there, this is my favorite. Take a look at this. So this is one that we talked about last week as well. This is a living animal. This one is a scallop. Okay, so this is a bay scallop, and it is alive. When it was quiet, it actually opened up its shell. You could see its bright blue eyes lining the edge of the shell. And so we said that this animal is really good at, oh, it's starting to open, Debbie. Can you see?
Yeah, I can.
Oh. Awesome. So hopefully when it peeked open just a bit, you could see those little dots along the edge, and again, those are the eyes, so that's pretty neat. These animals are really good at swimming in the water by opening and closing their shells, so this is a great find in the marsh at low tide.
Let's see, Peter, Iris, Kyle, and Greta all knew that that's an oyster.
Oyster!
That's a big fella too. Probably has been growing out here for a really, really long time.
That's right.
We're pretty excited to find an oyster that big out here. Pretty cool. Some other little nifty things that we found. I'm going to kind of reach into the bucket here. Is evidence of some other animals that might be using the marsh here. So this is not a dead crab. Don't worry, I wouldn't show you a dead crab on camera. It's a molt of a green crab, which is an invasive species. So I guess we're not too sad. But I know that it's a molt because it's got its gills right here are still intact and nothing else. It's super light on the inside. There's nothing else inside this molt. So this crab is probably still out and about, walking around, having a good time in the marsh, or maybe in the estuary a little bit as well. So they come in here. They're going to be eating some of the little snails that live in here and some other little invertebrates that live in the grasses of the marsh.
Right, and some of the other creatures that we found kind of hanging on to the edge of the marsh here are some periwinkle snails. You heard Debbie talk about the coffee bean snails. So usually we find those on the marsh. They travel up and down the blades of grass. You can find these snails, which are periwinkles, and then this one over here that looks a little bit different is a mud snail. So at low tide, we have much more space available, and we can see some of the other species that are coming in and out of the marsh. And so here are a couple of them.
So main difference here is the periwinkle and the coffee bean snail are herbivores, and that mud snail likes to eat carcasses that are on the bottom of the estuary. So they're doing an important job in the estuary too, or as part of the salt marsh, is sort of helping to recycle those materials, the decaying matter, and restoring nutrients to the ecosystem. So the marsh is helping to do that with microbes that'll break down the grass that dies back each year. And the nutrients, when the tide comes in, those nutrients can flow out into the estuary and act kind of like a little bit of a fertilizer for the spring bloom. So adding nutrients to the estuary, but it also can help limit an overabundance of nutrients too. This sponge-like peat can trap, and then the plants that are here will use excess nutrients that might be a problem runoff from our watershed. Are there any other benefits to the marsh, Callie, that you can think of?
Well, when I think about the marsh, I always think about feeding, breeding, nesting, resting. Just kind of helps me remember some of the important parts here. So this is a really important habitat for a lot of animals, including birds, especially birds that are migrating. So they'll stop here to refuel and feed. All these grasses provide really great nesting material as well. On our way in, we saw some ospreys that were nesting here. On the sandy shore, we have oyster catchers and piping plovers that are nesting nearby as well. And this is a great place for young animals to come. This grass provides a lot of habitat and places to hide. So at high tide, when these grasses are submerged, it's a great place to find lots of young animals. So there are a lot of benefits here to the marsh.
Yeah, we're really grateful to have so much marshland right close to Project O. We're right on the Pequannock River again, if you're just tuning in. There's more marsh that hugs different parts of the Pequannock River. So right all along this area here, if you go to Bluff Point State Park, you can check out some of these salt marshes. But we will remind you to exercise caution, because it actually can be a bit of a sensitive ecosystem too.
That's right.
So we want to make sure that we're not doing any harm while we're exploring nature. All right. So if you have any questions about the salt marsh, we found so many cool things here. We're going to continue to explore for a little while after we go off camera, but we'll definitely make sure to answer any questions you have about the salt marsh.
Yeah, so please put those in the comments. We look forward to hearing from you. And we want you to tune in again on Thursday. Marissa and Captain Ian are going to be going live from Smith Cove. He's got some minnow traps in the water as we speak, so kind of see what kinds of creatures you can find living in those minnow traps close to shore.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you Thursday.
All right, bye.
Bye.